All right, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another stock market outlook video brought to you by DeepView. This is my daily driver for screening, charting, watchlist management, idea management, the works. And if you want a special offer, check out the link down below in the description. As always, today we're going to cover the market leaders. We're going to discuss the market indexes as well and talk through really the current situation we're in. Going over to the QQQ here, you can see that today here on Friday, we had a positive expectation breaker, and what that basically means is we had a negative close the day before, and instead of following through to the downside, which is the expectation after a poor close like this, especially when we break these lows and look to be making further lows during the correction, instead of that happening, what we do is break expectations and gap up and hold. And not just hold today, we actually had a strong close, overall gaining about 2.4%. Now, this doesn't mean we're out of the woods. This is just a sign of strength in the context of the overall correction. And we'll discuss kind of the ramifications of that and go through, as I mentioned, the leading themes, leading stocks, and also some top ideas for the next week. All right, so again, looking at the QQQ, let's take a step back for a moment and just look at the bigger picture here. We've obviously had an uptrend. This is the part of an uptrend that's really happened and lasted since 2022, so about 3 years. And then we went through a choppy period before really breaking down with, of course, some added catalysts like the tariffs and different things, actually causing this severe correction. But right now we've been trending down for about 3 to 4 weeks. We're really trending below the declining 10 EMA and 21 EMA. We're breaking below the 200-day moving average. And right now, this would just be the potential for an oversold type move. Oversold moves are not necessarily healthy, but all uptrends typically start with an oversold move off the bottom that then gets supported and forms a higher low, and that higher low reconfirms the upside, and that's actually how we start uptrends. So this is necessary for the start of a potential rally. This doesn't mean that this will hold, but you want to kind of change your mindset and say, hey, there's the potential for something to develop here. You don't want to get stuck in this mindset that we're going to sell off forever. We want to be positive and look to find new ideas, keep track of relative strength, look for those leaders before they really develop, and we'll cover a lot of potential ideas later on today in this video. As I mentioned, positive expectation breaker today, but let's kind of talk about how this week set up. Last week, we ended with an upside reversal. We also had a similar upside reversal the week prior as well, and both Mondays were met with increased selling. This one gapped up, closed very negatively, led to continued down move. This one, just gapped down and closed very negatively, and we haven't made too much progress further, but still a very negative Monday. So keep that in mind when you see this very positive Friday, that we could give it all back in this type of environment very easily, and we still haven't even tested the declining 10 EMA, which will be a point of potential resistance. So even though Friday looks positive, keep in mind the overall market conditions, we're still choppy, we're still in a correction until kind of the market and price action proves us wrong with that fact. But going back to how this week started, again, we had a gap down, negative move down, but this close to me is pretty significant. And this is where kind of I added a note here the next day. Are we forming a local bottom? It doesn't mean that it's the bottom of the correction, but it could be an important short-term bottom where we rally and then either that fizzles out and we, reconfirm to the downside, or again, we start to form higher highs and higher lows and actually start a new uptrend. But, whatever you want to call it, this is the potential to be a local bottom. And why I kind of add this note is because despite, these negative days where, it looks very negative, we haven't really been able to progress much further down than this initial low. This day obviously closed above it. This day we rallied higher, then we gave it all back, but still, closed really close to this low. And then we have a positive expectation breaker on this Friday. So despite all the negativity, all the news headlines, all the negativity on Twitter as well, we haven't really made too much progress to the downside over the past 4 days. Now that could change again on Monday next week. We could reconfirm to the downside, but for the moment, you want to have, the mindset that potentially there's a shift happening and we could start a counter trend rally, and we'll have to see how we act once we test these declining moving averages. And certainly when we get to that 200-day moving average, if we do rally through the 10 EMA, this will be a key level to watch to see, do we get some type of downside reversal, reconfirm to the downside, or do we continue to show strength maybe form a higher low, rally into this higher low, and finally break above it and restart uptrend. So this level will be key if we do get to that level. But I think this idea here where we haven't really been able to make much progress to the downside after this very negative bar is something that's key, and suggested that there is some accumulation happening in the market, and we want to key in on now closely what are the themes holding up best, and especially what are the potential leaders coming out of this if this is the local bottom that we're looking for. So we'll cover a lot of those ideas later on in this video, but just kind of want to share my thoughts on this action and how we haven't really, despite all this negativity and all the news catalysts, we haven't been able to really progress further and reconfirm to the downside just yet. Looking at the SPY, this looks pretty similar. Again, very strong action here on Friday in the context of a downtrend. Looking at the IWM, this obviously, it didn't have the choppy period really. It just was continuing to correct and looks a lot more negative. But again, today we had a nice positive expectation breaker. We remain below the declining moving averages, but we'll have to see if we can rally and start some type of turn in this area. Whether that's the bottom, no one knows. We just have to kind of trade the cards we're dealt and see how things lie. Looking at the IBIT, this gives a nice proxy for Bitcoin. This has been showing relative strength over the past 4 days or so, where we again had a very negative Monday, but we haven't managed to make any progress to the downside despite the clear level being the 200-day moving average here. Instead, we'd rallied higher, formed a range a little bit higher than the Qs and the SPY were doing relatively. And then here on Friday, we broke above the highs of this range and are now testing the declining 10 EMA. So still in a downtrend, still in a down cycle, but potentially the start of a rally attempt, and we'll have to see how this acts into the 21 EMA. Do we form a higher low and push higher, higher low, push higher? That would start an uptrend, but there obviously is the potential for simply a downside reversal or just a reversal back to the downside and retest of these lows. But so far over the past 4 days since this gap down, it's been acting constructively. Looking at the mega caps, let's go ahead and load those charts and let's start with NVIDIA here. This has shown relative strength over the past 3 days or so. Remember what the QQQs looked like. We're forming a range up here and just had a little bit of a pop higher on this past Friday. This instead has made steady progress over the past 3 days, where we had a gap up and hold. We had basically a consolidation day here on Thursday, and then now we're back above the 21 EMA on NVIDIA here, which is key for growth stocks, for AI type names, for semiconductors, for a lot of reasons. This is a leading stock and is a good reflection of the risk appetite of institutions. Now, keep in mind the overall context of this chart. We've been in a choppy period for months. We're in an overall stage 3 type pattern, and this really has to prove itself to say, hey, this is worthy of your capital. And for me, I probably will be focusing elsewhere, but still using this as a gauge to see, do I want to press on the gas more, start positions, test the market out. But bottom line, this is constructive to see, and I'd love to see it break back above the 200-day moving average and 50 SMA. I think that will really be the key test to see, is this just going to roll back over like it did up here, or is this really the start of an uptrend and maybe even the start of a breakout of this longer term base that really started way back in middle of 2024. So NVIDIA, obviously a key stock for many reasons, and constructive to see it break back above the 21 EMA and also show relative strength over the past 3 days. I think that's really, really key. Tesla, bring up this chart. This has sold off quite a bit, and if we actually go ahead and measure this, it's been over 50% down towards the lows. And this day here was, it fell capitulatory. I can't say that word. You know exactly what I mean. It felt like the potential for, extension to the downside that then would snap back up. And that's kind of what we've done. We did kind of wait one more day before we did that, but we've got the potential for a higher low to form if we rally up and break back above the 10 EMA. This gap is a key level here. That's another potential point of resistance to deal with. And we are in a severe downtrend. But this is the start of a potential rally. We have a nice gap up that's held. You can see we retested this close area, rallied back up, had a good Friday, but there's a lot more to prove from this name. And again, I think there's better names out there. But this is the start of a potential bottoming process. And, a lot of people expect this to just snap back to highs and not give you any chance to get back in. What's really going to happen, even if this does, get back to this area, is it'll be a process. There'll be higher highs, higher lows, pulls back to moving averages, earnings gaps, pulls back from those to key levels. There'll be so many chances before this approaches all-time highs that if this does prove itself, you'll never be late to the party, and you just have to keep an eye on this if you do want to focus on a name like Tesla, which does have some fundamental catalysts going for it. But we'll just have to see if those fundamental catalysts lead to strong price action. And right now, this isn't a leading name given the severe downtrend we're currently in. This is just a potential counter trend rally right now. If it's going to be more than that, it's going to have to prove itself. Looking at Meta, this is also pulled back very, very hard. You can see the volatility as well during this downtrend. It's pulling back to the lows of this base area. And again, just watching to find basically the start of the bottoming process. Inside day today with a strong close after a very negative day today, or sorry, on Thursday. And that's constructive, but it still has a lot to prove, still below declining 10 EMA and 21 EMA. And again, for a natural base, this would take time to build out higher highs and higher lows and make its way back to these highs. So there's no huge rush here with these mega cap names. Still, this is just kind of like the left-hand side of a base, if you can picture a natural, normal type healthy consolidation. Bringing up Microsoft, nice push off lows today. Again, severe downtrend, longer term choppy period. So again, no rush. This is just one day of strength within the context of this downtrend. Look at this day, and what happened after those days. So that's definitely still in play and still something to be aware of. So this isn't the type of day that you want to go all in on, but it is a sign of strength and something to watch going forward. Moving on to Amazon, very similarly, looks like at the left-hand side of the base, we just undercut the 200-day moving average. This is potentially resistance and a key pivot point now below declining 10 and 21 EMA, and just needs more, more information required to really start a new uptrend. Apple, this really fell apart the last few days, and I know there's been grumblings about how they've kind of dropped the ball in terms of AI and integration with Siri, and overall, very choppy stage 3 type action and very severe break of the 200-day moving average. So rallies into the declining moving averages will be suspect, and this really has to prove itself to turn things around. You've got downside reversal bars, breaks below the key moving averages, reconfirmations down, breaking the 200-day moving average. A lot of signs of distribution in this particular stock. Lastly, we've got Google. Looks very similar. You've got a gap down off the top, another sign of weakness, reconfirmation down, tested the 10 EMA, declining, reconfirmation down. So just still has a lot to prove here. And again, an overall choppy period. So, the stage analysis indicator for most of these names is actually in stage 4. This more looks like stage 3 turning into stage 4 to me, especially NVIDIA, because we're below those key moving averages. But, stage 3s can transition back into stage 2s. So we have to keep an open mind. And this has shown nice relative strength over the past 3 days. But pretty much with all these mega caps, more information is required. And the reason I look at these is because it's a great gauge of the risk appetite of institutions. This is where they kind of go to hide during corrections. And, the market's going to be hard pressed to make progress when these aren't in uptrends. But also it's going to be hard pressed to start an uptrend without these rallying and reclaiming moving averages like we're seeing with NVIDIA. But the other ones kind of leave a lot to be desired. So that's one input I'm taking into account when looking at these names. Also down here, I've got deep view, net new highs, new lows, no clear change in trend right now. Breadth is still declining, so no clear kind of bottoming signs from there. But again, we'll have to see how these indicators develop. For me, of course, I look at the indexes, I look at these breadth metrics, I get a sense of what the mega caps are doing, what market leaders are doing, and the individual stocks themselves and how they're kind of building out bases and potentially starting new uptrends. So I kind of have a holistic perspective on what the market's doing. And right now, I'd give it maybe a C, C minus, C plus in that we're kind of forming potentially the first possible signs of a rally attempt, but there's still a lot to be desired in terms of confirmation, stock setting up proper bases. A lot of names are still forming the left-hand sides of the bases, as I mentioned before, but we'll cover a lot of stocks and leading groups that are a lot ahead of that in the cycle later on in this video. Moving on, let's kind of talk themes here for a second. This is my performance chart here in deep view. On the left-hand side, we've got kind of a daily view of leading themes. So this is price percent change from the open. And you can see ERX, energy, this is small caps, and you can see what the leading names were today. IGV stood out to me in individual names wise as well. Software is something to keep an eye on in terms of a growth theme that's developing. But overall, we just saw a broader based rally today, and we saw distribution from a lot of the themes that are a little bit more defensive and have been leading, but these didn't even really get hit that hard. But overall, this just kind of looked like a steady rally day. Over here on the right hand side is how I kind of track the current existing leading themes. The strongest ones over the past 20 days, the strongest ones are going to be at the top, the weakest ones at the bottom. We can see we've got China technology at the top, miners, very defensive minded names, which makes sense because we have been in a correction. And what will be key is if we start to see IGV consistently at the top here, it climbing the ranks, and other kind of leading type, growth type groups also performing well. So that's kind of what I'm seeing in terms of leadership groups. No clear kind of transition back to growth just yet, but starting to see something to keep an eye on here with IGV. Blockchain obviously showing relative strength with IBIT and MSCR over the past just very short term past few days, but still a lot to be desired, and we'll have to see how things develop. And still the leading themes are China, insurance, what else? Utilities is strong. Biotech is definitely a leading area. Healthcare equipment, and oil and gas recently. There's been a lot of movements there, and also the miners have been strong. And those aren't traditionally names that have very powerful or very long range trends, and not something I personally favor trading. So really the key sign of the correction for me will be the development of new leadership groups that are more growth minded, technology, AI, semiconductors retaking the front and acting tremendously well. And we're just not seeing that just yet. Again, we're just seeing a potential start of a move off the bottom. We're still very, very early in the kind of market cycle process, and we basically need a lot more information, and more information required. So with that, let's transition over to a few kind of key names that I'm keeping an eye on. All right, so getting into some individual names that are showing relative strength, setting up, and potentially setting up ahead of the market indexes. Let's go ahead and dive right in. And PTGX is the first one here. And by the way, as we go through these, I really want to hear your thoughts as well. Also, if there's a stock that is showing relative strength, clear relative strength that I'm not going through, definitely drop it down in the comment section so we can help everybody out. And I'll try to leave my thoughts on as many names that you guys suggest as possible. But PTGX, biotech, this of course has been the strongest group over the past few weeks, and they're kind of a little bit uncorrelated to the market. There's been a lot of explosive moves here. This one obviously had a strong breakout higher through this base. This is, a longer term, it's in a longer term uptrend, but biotech always comes with additional risk, which is again why this isn't really a group that I prefer trading. But nice, powerful move here, and now it's kind of having its first potential pullback, and I'd love to see it kind of pull in, go sideways, form out a range above the 10 EMA, and then reconfirm to the upside. That's what I'm watching with this name. The next one I want to cover here is HSAI, and let me open this up here. This is a powerful mover, strong uptrend, strong breakout here on some announcement. I forget exactly what happened here, but you had a catalyst on this day, and now it's pulling back into the 10 EMA, and really has to prove itself now. We've been flagging back a little bit further within the width or range of this bar than I'd like. And this is the type of pullback where now you'd expect it to, okay, let's go ahead and reconfirm. Let's gap up and go on Monday. We'll have to see what happens. Of course, this is a volatile name and more of a speculative name. And that's another thing. A lot of the names that are acting well right now aren't top quality based on earnings, sales, liquidity, price, all of that. So there's still a lot to be desired in terms of the stocks that are actually setting up as of this moment, in addition to the actual themes that are setting up right now, which also leave a lot to be desired. RRC, speaking of themes that leave a lot to be desired, this is one of the oil and gas names that are setting up. This along with EQT, which we'll take a look at in just a moment. Breaking above a range here. I had it on my radar yesterday. Nice action. This is one that can trend a little bit, but just overall, this is a kind of a whippier commodity-based name, and just not really a theme that is conducive to months and months of trending. More just kind of quick moves and take your profits and go after a downside reversal, and certainly breaks below the moving averages. But we'll see if we can start a nice momentum move here as we go. CEA CENX here. This is setting up the right-hand side of a base. I'd love to see one more pullback back into the moving averages, form out this kind of flag range here. But this is one that can actually make really powerful moves. Again, it's not really in a space that I really prefer, but is showing relative strength recently, reclaiming the moving averages and setting up within this base. So if it can form a range here, break out, that's something that I would definitely have on my radar. Again, this is a whippier, more volatile, lower price name as well. Moving on, we've got FNV, one of the miners that I'm watching. This one has been on my radar since this base here. There's been a lot of names like this, AEM as well. And this is just trending nicely. Nothing you can really do here, but there are names, a few names like AU, which are kind of setting up with a tight day right near a key level. So you've got plenty of names to choose from in this area if you're looking to trade this particular theme. ADMA, going back to biotechs, is setting up here. Again, short-term range, a little bit stretched from the moving averages. I'd love to see it kind of pull back here again, maybe have a shakeout bar, let the 10 EMA, 21 EMA catch up to price, but basically setting up a short-term range here below this other key level, above the moving averages, and watching for continuation to the upside. This is one that can really trend. This had a really powerful momentum move before the base it's currently pulling back in. But again, it's a biotech, it's more speculative, but I like the look overall of the price and volume action, except for really this very negative bar down here. But this is just one that is a faster mover. And when you're trading these type of names, especially during a correction, you just have to keep that in mind and, lower your risk overall, take smaller position sizes, and recognize that biotechs in particular can gap down 75% for no reason. So you really have to position size to manage that risk. EQT, going back to oil and gas, this also breaking out of a similar range. This is one that can trend a little bit nicer. I always like going back in time to see, what type of moves can they make when they reclaim the 21 EMA. That kind of sets my expectations for whether it's going to be a swing trade, position trade, how volatile it's going to be. And this one, like RRC, is kind of part of a bigger, longer term base that it really started back in 2022, which is kind of the last time that these names really thrived, which unfortunately was during the bear market. But EQT is a name that can make a pretty substantial move here and is potentially setting up the right hand side of the base. Earliest entry would have been through this high, but we're still moving up the right hand side of this base. MDGL, going back to biotech, you'll see a lot of these names on the list. Early entry today through this pivot, and see if it can break out through this overall kind of base pivot here and really start to trend. There's another one that can move really fast, but it's a biotech. There's added risk there. And again, not really a focus, just a name that I'm watching that is showing relative strength. So not all of these would I personally trade. It's more that this is what's showing relative strength and setting up currently in the market environment. TGTX, this is a little bit higher quality in terms of a biotech. And I really like the price and volume action here. I've been tracking this since this day right here, where it broke out on earnings, formed a tight range, reconfirmed to the upside, formed another range pullback, and reconfirmed today. And this was definitely actionable on this day, even this day as well, if you caught it early, and is setting up nicely and, has some catalyst behind it as well in a relative strength phase. So a more higher quality biotech. And there's kind of a few reasons why I say that, but if you take a look at the earnings and sales, it's got decent revenues, relatively high, and actually earns money. So with biotechs, obviously a lot of them are speculative, almost pre-revenue and just burning money. This one at least is posting some profits, even though they're not huge, and has decent revenue growth. And their earnings expectations, it's nice to see this in deep view here, is set to really increase over the next few earnings reports. So that is TGTX. ACMR, this one's an interesting one. Obviously, semiconductors have gotten hit really hard, but this one has been in actually a steady uptrend since the start of the year and showing extreme relative strength. We're breaking out again today. Not necessarily actionable until it pulls back the next time, but definitely a name to keep in mind as it builds the right-hand side of this longer-term base and makes its way towards these highs. You can see the relative strength phase started way back with this nice earnings gap off lows. Actually, I'm not sure if there's an earnings gap, just a nice gap through the moving averages here. CRK, looking at this, setting up a downward trend line. There's another kind of commodity type name that can really trend, but setting up a nice range here and watching for a pop through this downward trend line. ERJ, this is an aerospace defensive name that's been acting really well, popping above the range today, a little bit of a fade off highs. It's been very strong relatively. You can see the RS new highs here before price, but just needs a little bit of pause here, a little bit of a fade. I'd expect maybe an inside day before it tests these highs if it does break out of that area, but definitely showing RS but not really actionable for a position trade, more of a swing trade type name in this type of environment. RGLD, another miner worth keeping an eye on, inside day at this key level. Z-Lab, going back to biotechs, I'll kind of be flipping back between both those themes. Nice pop today, not actionable for sure. Going forward, we need a little bit more of a back test into this pivot or these highs into the moving averages before you'd want to act on it again. But it was actionable near this pivot, and I was keeping an eye on it in this area since it showed relative strength as it formed kind of a cup and handle pattern after a pretty nice move off these lows. Moving on, we've got ACLX, another biotech, setting up after it reclaimed the moving averages. Nice push off lows here, and there's another one that can trend pretty nicely, and basically watching for a resumption of a trend just like this up the right hand side of this base. MCK, a lot of pharma names have been acting well as well. Healthcare providers, big base here, broke out, showed relative strength in this area, and is in RS phase, and now had a nice tight inside day and then outside day today, actionable through this high, and watching basically for a nice trend to continue from this name. YPF is a name that can trend nicely when it really gets going. It was part of those names that were acting really well, South America related company, and now it's kind of pulling back for quite some time, right near this downward trend line, breaking above the 21 EMA. So what I'd love to see in here is a higher low to form in this area and then pop through and show some power up the right hand side of the base. That's what I'd love to see. So not necessarily set up right now for my liking. I know some people like to buy these downward trend line breaks. More of me, personally, I just like to see a change in character with a break through that and then wait for the next higher low. MP, this is a really good one. I've had this on my radar for quite some time. Showed relative strength by holding near the pivot during the market correction. And just in general, as an aside here, there's a lot of signs of relative strength during a correction you can look for, but holding near base pivot levels, holding above moving averages when the market undercuts it, forming higher lows when the market forms lower lows. Those are all sorts of things that you want to keep an eye on when you're trying to spot relative strength during a correction. Yesterday, you can see very tight action. It wasn't an inside day, but it kind of was in the spirit of one. RMV went to 0. And nice breakout move here today, up about 10%. So it definitely shows the value of spotting relative strength and focusing on themes that are actually leading in the current environment. AXSM, another biotech name that was showing relative strength in this area. It's been pulling back though, but forming a tight range, a very tight consolidation today. So the expectation is there'll be a big move on Monday, and we'll see if that's the upside or if it breaks lower and reconfirms the downside. But this type of day often precedes big moves to the upside or downside. So definitely a biotech to have on your radar, especially if you're a swing trader. This can make pretty significant moves in just a few days. RPRX is a new one that got on my radar recently. Nice action and nice trend after this big gap up, pulling back to the 21 EMA area and basically watching for a push through these highs here, popping above the 21 EMA. Another one that's much more suited towards swing trading. And just in general with biotechs, I'm going to be much more aggressive in selling if I do trade them. And you got to manage risk with position size because, as I mentioned, they can really gap down on you if they just miss FDA approval, or even if they get FDA approval, sometimes they'll gap down out of nowhere. So definitely want to protect yourself. And, for most people, I think better off just avoid them and focus on other groups and themes since there's definitely other opportunities out there. This is just kind of the names that are setting up currently. Spotify strongly came in the 21 EMA, watching for a higher low up the right-hand side of this base. BABA, China, of course, has been holding up really nicely. Oops reversal yesterday. Very tight action today. This is an ADR, so it's a little bit tougher to trade because of all these gaps. But watching basically for reconfirmation to the upside. Again, these type of days often directly precede breakouts to the upside or downside. And we'll see if it can, break through this high and break out of this overall base it's been forming as it forms RS new highs before price. I had it on my radar back in this area. Super strong trend here, and now setting up another base that is pretty tight, about 13%. Uber. This one obviously has been pulling back hard. It showed some relative strength in this area, but has since undercut the 21 EMA. But now it's forming another range here right near the 200-day moving average. So on a relative basis, even though it has been pulling back, it's, you know, above the 200-day moving average when the QQQ is below. So it is still showing RS, not as strong as I would have liked over the past week, but forming a range and watching for a pop higher and reclaim of those moving averages. INOD acting really well. Nice action through these highs here today, just below the 21 EMA, and basically watching for reconfirmation on the upside. You can see it retested this downward trend line that formed, as well as the 50-day moving average, popped above those, and showing pretty good RS, and we'll see if it can fall through to the upside. RBRK, this had a nice earnings gap today, nice pop higher back in this base area, and basically watching for a post, you know, either fall through to the upside or a nice range to form against the moving averages. I'd love to see it contract in volatility while the 21 EMA and 10 EMA kind of catch up to price here and then reconfirm. That would be ideal, and definitely a focus if that does occur. But this type of action, especially in a poor market environment, if it can hold up, is definitely worth paying attention to. KC, this is another China-related speculative one that can really move and is highly volatile, but just want to kind of track this setup. I probably won't trade this. One, it's an ADR. Two, it's a China name. Three, it's extremely volatile, but just wanted to keep tabs on this because it's fun to look at strong charts. So we'll see if this can break out and continue its trend. Guild, this is its first pullback to the 21 EMA. And we'll see if it can respond here. Upside reversal, form a range. You could use a variety of entry tactics to enter the first pullback after this nice base breakout, after it's been showing really nice relative strength. TTWO, forming a nice range just below the 21 EMA. This was showing relative strength in this area. It did pull back, but has been holding up well. And again, it's kind of leading the market in the very short term. Nice push off lows and then going tight. And we'll see if we can reconfirm to the upside through those moving averages. Amgen, bringing on up this name, of course. Biotech pharma has been holding up well. This did pull back sharply on Monday, but what we're doing right now is basically forming a range at this prior base pivot. So watching respect for that level, as well as the confluence of the 21 EMA that has been support since this move off of lows. Is a little bit of a slower mover, but it is one of a leading theme. And again, it's actually a biotech that has earnings, so a little bit more of a higher quality type name, even though it is a little bit shorter. Or slower, sorry. Okta, definitely a name to have on your radar. Potentially actionable today through this high for sure. Gap and go move, and you know, acting well out of this flag. This is the next key level here. We'll see if it can move up, tighten, and then set up a nice reconfirmation higher. But probably the best entry was through this high right here. I actually wrote an article for the Trade Lab about how to execute on day one of this earnings gap, which has held up tremendously well. Again, a clear sign of relative strength that held the 10 EMA during a market correction, and now is acting well as the market pressure lessens a little bit here today, and we'll see if it can follow through. I love how it's at an overall key level on the weekly, and potentially starting a new stage 2 uptrend if we can reconfirm higher and continue to trend. Also want to bring up PLTR. This, of course, is a former leader that is potentially forming another base here against this base high pivot and setting up below the 50 SMA and 21 EMA. So it'd be constructive for, of course, PLTR, but also just the market in general, if we can fall through to the upside and pop through these moving averages. Reddit, another, of course, former leader that had a clear reversal extension down and now is potentially forming its first higher low if it can reconfirm to the upside, but it still has a lot of overhead to deal with. It's about 50%, you know, it was about 50% off highs and still is quite a bit off highs and has to deal with the declining moving averages. So it will be a process to get back up here, but this is a name that can trend. It's early on in its life cycle and has, you know, very strong growth metrics. So this will be a name I'm watching and to see if it can form a spot up the right-hand side of this base. In other news, QBTS had a very strong move today. I saw a lot of people talking about this. This is, again, more of a speculative secondary type name, but it can really move about 1,000% in, you know, 40 days or so, and now is moving up the right-hand side of its second base. So I'd love to see a handle form here, contract in volatility, let the moving averages catch up to price, and then set up a secondary spot, hopefully shaking out everybody, getting it off people's radar, look very terrible, and then have a positive expectation breaker and just go. That would be ideal, but really big volume coming into this name. So definitely a name to keep an eye on, especially if you're a very short-term trader looking for something that's really going to make a move. This one made a move of 47% in one day. So a name to trade, and probably this theme in general is in play over the next few days. There's a few other names, QMCO, RGTI also that are related to this theme that are potentially playable as well, again, off the bottom. So still relatively early in this theme, if this is kind of a secondary wave like what they had back in October to about January of this year. So we'll see if these can follow through. Again, expect a lot of volatility with these names and some pretty significant moves intraday. These aren't for the faint of hearted, but overall, those are pretty much the names I want to run through today. Hopefully it gave you some ideas, but in general, just for me, taking a step back, looking at the overall market conditions, again, we're still below declining 10 and 21 EMA, potential for fall through to the upside, early next week. And that would be the start or continuation of a rally that started on this day. And really since, this day, since we haven't progressed further to the downside, but we're below declining 10, we're below declining 21, below declining 50, below a flattening 200-day moving average. So there's a lot of reasons to still be cautious, taking it slow. If we are going to start a new uptrend, plenty of bases are going to develop and break out, and there'll be plenty of time to get onto the leaders. Really, right now is just for very aggressive traders who, are pros at buying off lows and like to catch that first powerful move up. For those who like to buy the first higher low or pull back into the moving average after reclaiming them, there's still plenty of time. So know yourself, know your style, know how you like to trade corrections. And if you don't know how to trade corrections, go back and study a bunch of them. There's so many great resources. Traderline, we have got a corrections resource that you can study all of them. I'll link that down below. I think it's well worth studying these great opportunities, because the deeper this goes, the more tremendous and stronger the uptrend is going to be on the other side. And it can make your year, this move out of this correction whenever it does come. So be patient, wait for your spots, manage risk. Don't feel FOMO if we get, even a 5% up day next week, or even a 7% up day next week. Eventually there'll be a higher low that forms after that, and that will give even better risk reward spots if you don't like finding spots intraday. So be patient, know yourself, know where you excel in the market cycle. And, keep in mind, again, that right now there isn't really a leadership growth theme that's developed yet. We saw maybe the first signs of it with software today, but, it still leaves a lot to be desired. And right now, a lot of more defensive or just difficult groups to trade are leading: biotech, China, utilities, oil and gas. So, wait for your pitch, whether that's the market conditions that need to set up properly, the leading groups to set up properly, whatever it is, be patient and all of that. So overall, I hope you guys enjoyed this analysis. If you want even more and kind of want my thoughts daily, definitely check out the Trade Lab, which is my newsletter service. I put a tremendous amount of energy to make that as valuable as possible, covering market indexes, leading themes, and leading stocks, setting up every single day, just like this, in article and report format. So if you want to stay on top of the market leaders and really get my thoughts every day, and I'll be right on top of the best opportunities setting up coming out of this correction, the next A-Lab, the next Reddit, all of that. We caught a lot of those moves, last super strong uptrend, and I'm confident we're going to catch the next ones as well. So definitely check that out if you're interested in it. And hopefully you guys found this helpful. Let me know your thoughts on the market down below. Any names I forgot and want my opinion on, let me know and ask me down below as well. And one more thing, we're doing special webinars for the Trader's Handbook, which is our book that will be out in May. These are completely free, and they kind of cover the key steps of building a trading system. So I'll put the link to that down below as well. We've got the first webinar today, actually. So if you're not registered already, go ahead and do so at the link down below. And if you sign up for the waitlist for the book, we'll send out a lot of bonus content, bonus articles. You'll get the chance to be involved with many different exclusive giveaways, webinars, presentations, articles, as I mentioned. So definitely go ahead and do that. The book, we worked incredibly hard on it, and I think it will help out a lot of traders. So if you're struggling, still relatively new to the game, or just kind of want a refresher and want to improve your system, I think there's something in this for all trading levels, from beginner all the way to an advanced. So definitely check it out using the link down below. Sign up for the interest list, and it'll be great to see your guys' thoughts on the book once it's finally released. And I'd love for you guys to go ahead and pre-order it. Show some support for myself. That would be great. But with that said, thanks so much for watching. Leave a like down below if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new to the channel, and I'll see you guys in future videos. Take care.